We good? All right. Good morning, guys. So another workshop. We run workshops every Saturday. I'm going to run another workshop next week before I travel. While I'm away for 2 weeks, there'll be no workshops. Today's workshop is a continuation of last week's workshops, but we're going to explore different topics around cancer, our intervention protocols around cancer. So my name is Charles Sine. I'm the CEO of Anti-Fragility Health. We also run clinical research upstairs. But I am dedicating this workshop today to a friend who died 2 weeks ago. Dana was an executive at the power company. I knew about more than 14 years ago, and she was a heavy woman. And 4 or 5 years ago when she retired, I had a meeting with her, and I said you needed to get healthy. By then, I myself was not healthy. That was even before I started Anti-Fragility Health. But I started Anti-Fragility Health because of her cousin who had a stroke, and I've told that story here. But she died 2 weeks ago. In March this year, she started having some pain in her feet and her back. And the doctor said, oh, it was just perhaps arthritis and all of that. And then it got very serious a month, 2 months ago. And she went into Kaiser. And when they did all the diagnostics, they realized that there was cancer everywhere. Okay? And they gave her immunotherapy, and I actually have had failed under the immunotherapy. So a lot of things that people are not aware of is that if you don't know these things, there's going to come a time when you have to make decisions about that. And that's the purpose of my workshop. So you are an educated, empowered patient. So you know about your health. Hey, Victor is in the house. So you know about your health. You know about the therapies that are out there. You know the weaknesses and the strengths of those therapies so that you can make really informed choices. Because the challenge is that when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're under a lot of pressure to make a decision. And what we are providing today is a roadmap that allows you to really understand what drives cancer, where does cancer come from? And if you're diagnosed with cancer, what are the things that you need to do? That's what we're going to walk through today. It's intellectually heavy. God created it heavy. I didn't create it. The architecture is really, really complicated. So I'm not going to make it simple because it is complicated. And if we don't understand it, that is our problem. Right? Because then doctors are going to start explaining stuff to you and make decisions that may not be best for you, and you have to deal with it. Soul is in the house. Right? Okay, let us start. Let me give you copies of the protocol. Can you come and pass copies of the protocol? Yeah, give them notebooks. I don't have to remind you guys every time. Give them notepads and pens. Come on, guys. We have a lot of them. And pens, right? So people want to make notes. Yeah, well, they'll give you a notepad. Okay, let's go ahead. Welcome. So pay attention to me. The book you're going to read doesn't tell you anything, right? So it's a behavioral thing. When you go into a meeting and you're giving notes, just put it down and wait. If you start looking at it, you're going to confuse yourself, right? Isn't that right, Victor? And I don't want you getting confused, all right? If you're really smart, then you wouldn't be in my workshop. So you need to just relax, and I'm going to take you through it. So let's start from the beginning. So the things that cause, excuse me, can you pay attention to me, please? Thank you. There are a couple of things that start chronic illness. Okay? So let me just talk to you about the back of this. So our protocol looks at what we call, Dinah's here, cancer, you've just been diagnosed, cancer, you're in treatment, cancer after treatment, and cancer life beyond treatment. Okay? And then it looks at the macronutrients around that. And our strategy is, how do you outrun, outmaneuver, outsmart, and win against cancer? That's the conversation today. Let's go into the main pages and look at that. You're going to take that home so you can always look at that. There are two questions that in our intervention strategy we tend to ask patients. The first one is, do you need to be rid of something such as toxins, allergy, infection, poor diet, or stress? So why do we need to get rid of toxins?
Poisons or toxins.
Sorry?
They make you sick.
How?
Well, if it's lead, they make you sick. If it's
And how do you know that lead makes you sick?
produce free radical, and then the free radical build up and cause all this inflammation.
Okay, so but you know that all of us have lead.
Yes.
Why do we have lead?
Well, because lead sometimes contain in food, stuff you pick up from third.
Mostly from the pipes that our water flows through, right? They're mostly lead pipes. There's also lead from the air, right? And there's lead in the food. And so, but all of us have lead in us.
Just depends on the amount of lead.
Yes, it depends on the amount, and it depends on how that could be triggered inside your health, right? So that's one of it. Why are allergies a problem for chronic illness? You know, a lot of Americans say, oh, I have allergies. Why is that a problem?
Your immune system is low.
No, that's not why. Really, when you have a lot of allergic reaction, your body is saying there's an invader that your body is not comfortable with. Is that making sense? There's an invader that your body is not comfortable with. And if that persists, what is the damage that creates?
The body keeps fighting.
And what does that cause?
Inflammation.
It weakens.
Yeah, it weakens because it's distracting from all the other things that the immune system needs to be checking on. Like cells that are becoming cancerous. Do you understand? Every day, every moment in your body, there are cells that are becoming cancerous. So your Th1, Th2, Th17, what we call natural killer cells, are always focused in fighting and killing them off. So if you distract the immune system to take care of allergies, then it is not doing the work that it needs to be focused on. So let's explore something else. What else, like I'm listed, why is infections also challenging as a source of chronic illness?
Say that again.
Why are infections not a good thing? Whether it's viral or bacterial or pathogen infections. Why is that not a good thing? So for example, if you have persistent infections, what is the problem?
This residue
It
in there.
weakens your body.
Yeah, well, you know, he keeps going through the interim step of inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing. The only challenge with inflammation is when it becomes chronic. But the point is, the outcome I'm more interested in, it distracts the immune system. And therefore, if you keep toxicity low, if you keep allergies out, If you keep infections out, then you have,
The immune system.
yes, it's like I have alarm in my offices here and upstairs. If you keep triggering the alarm and there's a false alarm, if I don't respond in time, the police come. If the police come and it's a false alarm, do you know how much Anaheim charges me? $500. So there's a price for false alarms. Do you get the point? A lot of people are not aware. The body too pays a price when there are false alarms. And that's the inflammation response that's very critical. There's a price. It's not free. You know, I thought it was free that the police came and there is no issue. But the city says there is a price for you distracting us from our main duty of keeping the peace. It's the same thing. There's a price you pay for distracting the immune system. If the immune system comes and there's a real problem, then that is what their job is. Do you understand? Okay. So let's go to what we call the 6 causes. Okay, let's go to what is the 6 causes at the source of chronic illness. So let me just give you a context about chronic illness. You know, a couple of people stand on my machine, the Menla scan. And you know how a lot of people think I'm eating well, I'm in good health. You know why? Why do they think they're in good health, Victor?
For different reasons. Some work at it, or they feel good. They feel good, I guess.
And why is feeling good not a good measure of health?
Because you actually don't know what's going on.
Exactly. That's why I don't believe in polling data. 92% said Hillary Clinton was going to be president. Most people don't know what's going inside their body. And then they go to their doctor, and the doctors, including Kaiser, including this woman who died of cancer 2 weeks ago, they didn't find out she was cancerous until 3 months ago. Why? Because every time she goes, they just do a simple blood test. What we do, and I'm going to talk about it, it's a comprehensive depth of tests that we baseline every year to tell you where your health is. That is the most comprehensive way to know your status of health. And we're going to talk about that. So let's walk through this. And that test would tell you what your toxic levels are. Those toxins are biological, they're elemental, and they're synthetic. Give me an example of a synthetic toxin. Drugs. Yeah, well, but not all pharmaceuticals are synthetic. Some of them are biologics. We test them upstairs. Not all of them are synthetic. Some are biologics. That means they're imitation of biological molecules, right? We can create, right? We can create natural molecules like sugar and other things. You know, we can create them in the lab. Yeah, but he's right. There's a lot of synthetics, but I thought he was going to talk about things like plastic, like phenols, right? Like what we have in toothpaste. You know the plastics you swallow every time you use toothpaste, especially if you buy the stupid toothpastes, right? They have that gritty thing inside. Emerson, what do you think that gritty thing inside in the toothpaste is?
Plastic.
It's plastic. And so when they went into the ocean, they found tons of it in fish. We don't know what that plastic does to us long term. And we brush with that toothpaste every day, right? And you swallow it, right? You cannot say you don't swallow some of it. So all of that is accumulating inside of you. So when we say elemental toxins, what is an elemental toxin? It's almost what he said: lead, mercury. Those are elemental. Strontium. All those radioactive heavy metals are elemental. What would be a biological toxin? Thank you. Well, things like that, like mold, just things that are biological or biofilm, right?
Vegetables?
Vegetables? No, that's not a toxin. Some things in the vegetable could be, yeah, could be. Ah, yeah, he comes from Africa, so he knows that there are some poisonous plants. Sorry, I forgot that you are a country boy. He knows that there are poisonous mushrooms, right, and leaves that are... Yeah, but when the birds don't eat it, we don't eat it, right? That's how you go into the forest. You look, if the birds are not eating it, you do not eat it. Don't think you're smarter than the birds.
Not only birds, even the animals.
Yeah, they don't eat it. You know, sometimes you arrive, you look at this tree, all the fruits very ripe, very fresh. Why are they not eating it? Yeah, they're not stupid. They saw their friends eat it and die. Right? And so we don't eat it. All right? So let's look at allergens. We spoke about allergens already. You know, a lot of people say they like dried seeds. It's good for us. But the challenge is how they dry these fruits. When they move it from fresh to dry, that process is a process where a lot of mold invades the system. So you really have to be careful about dried fruit. And molds, we all carry them inside. They're very dangerous, right? And then dust and pollens and all of that we breathe every day, right? That's why I have these amazing air filters in my home, in my room, and in my offices, filtering the air every day. Because if you're going to spend a lot of time in here, you want to make sure you're breathing good air. We do the same thing with our water filter, right? We have an amazing water filter. So you want to make sure you have that at home. In your bedroom, you have water filter, because this issue of toxins, then microbes, right? I just spoke about water. Most of us eat in restaurants. We don't even know what the water was used to cook the food. We don't know whether the meat was good or not. You know, for example, I have a very strong sense of smell. I can tell when something is bad immediately. Actually, I can smell rice that's going bad before it goes bad. Right? A lot of people don't, because they just think, oh, they gave me the rice, I just start eating. I'm like, you got to smell the food, right? You got to make sure, because that's why God gave you that aspect of smell, right? And then let's look at stress. For those who've been attending my class, you know those 4 areas of stress, right? So that's why most people, when they climb on the machine and my machine says they're stressed, they're like, well, but I'm not stressed. Well, stress is not something we're all aware of, because if you have glycemic dysregulation, where does glycemic dysregulation come from? It comes from insulin resistance and your inability to metabolize carbohydrates or sugars efficiently and effectively. And all of us are genetically predisposed to different levels of it. So you may not know, right, like Asians are predisposed to metabolizing sugar and carbohydrates better than everybody else. But they have a weakness in that their architecture stores their fat viscerally than adipose. So when they get on my machine, their visceral fat is always high and their adipose fat is low, or subcutaneous fat is low, and when an African or white person steps on the machine, it's the other way around. Which is the more dangerous fat? Visceral fat. And that's why you tend to find out that cancer is becoming a huge concern in the Asian community. Because when you have fat around the organs, then it tends to drive and feed the cancer. Are we clear about that?
I have a question. What does visceral is with that?
Viscera is that brown fat. It's the kind of fat that is around the organs. It's not in the subcutaneous layer.
It's not on the belly.
No, well, even on the belly, there are 2 kinds of fat. There's fat in the subcutaneous and there's fat in the glands. And when you get on our machine, it tells you which ones you have. Yeah, you cannot just look at it and look at my brother Emerson and say he has a lot of visceral fat. All of his fat might be adipose fat.
Oh, hidden, right? That's what
Yeah.
Isn't that the fat underneath the muscle?
No, yes, subcutaneous, yes.
The muscle.
Yeah, in the skin. Actually, before the muscle.
Before the muscle.
Yes.
That's the adipose.
Yes, subcutaneous. And then the visceral one is the one that sits, like leads to non-alcoholic fatty acid, the fatty disease, liver disease. So when you have fat around your glands, your organs, and it's typically the brown fat. So you're also going to look at when you do your Googling, you'll find out that white fat is better than brown fat. The brown fat is the more dangerous fat. Okay? So when you're also eating. Okay. Then there is the issue that our friend here was talking about, inflammation signals. So if you're always having inflammation, it causes a lot of stress to the body. Because it's fighting like America, fighting 10 wars. It depletes our national reserve because we're stressed financially, right? That's why we can't build airports and bridges and freeways, because we're fighting wars, right? So there's a price to being distracted. You get that? And it's a very important price you pay. Then there's nutrient deficiency. So most people here follow diets because they read about the diets, but they have not found out what is the optimized diet for themselves, right? All of us, based on our age, our gender, and our ethnicity, and sometimes our genetics, we need to find a diet that works for us. Not all of us. And I don't call it diets, actually. I call it your micronutrient and your macronutrient daily plan. Right? And so you will see that I have a lot of things here. A lot of people are now going on a keto diet, which is an 80% fat, 15% protein, and less than 5% carb. And the carbs that are approved are really just very simple ones like vegetables and avocados, and very little. A patient was arguing with me yesterday about apples. Apples are good for you. Well, they're also full of sugar. So if you're above 50 years old, you should not be eating an apple a day, right? You should eat it like once a week. But you should be getting the nutrients that apple gives you from other means, because you don't need that sugar. Because that sugar is very dangerous for you, right? Okay. So very important, guys. That's why we talk about ketogenic diets. And then there's just the genetic risk, right? For black people, we come with an underlying genetic risk around our metabolism. We have significant cardiovascular risk. We have a lot of risk about our kidney function and also about our heart muscles, right? Asians have significant challenges with their overall gastric architecture. That's why colorectal cancers and things like that are very high among Asian people. Also, Asians, what they're finding out, have different architectures on how diabetes starts in Asian people. They used to think that diabetes for Asians was the same like for black people, Hispanics, and white people. They're finding out it's different. They may have normal values, but become diabetic. And so all of these things are coming out from research. So when you don't do the level of testing that we do, you don't know. And as we all know, right, Victor, ignorance is not an excuse. So not knowing in the age where there is information about everything is not an excuse. So what are the tests that we run here to get you to a place of knowledge? So the first thing that we do, and most of you have done it, is we run the genetics. We run pathway genomics. This is a very important, and you have to run it only once in life, right? And it gives you your genetic architecture. You now know what is good, what is bad, and what is normal, right? We call them, there is optimizers, right? You know, like black men, we use oxygen very well. That's why we run all the marathons and all the 100-meter races. How many white people win at 100 meters? I don't remember the last time. that a white guy won at 100 meters or an Asian guy. I mean, I'm shocked. I saw some Chinese running the finals of the 100 meters. Not bad.
Russia did before they used to run. Before.
What about that guy Roger Bannister? What nationality was he?
Yeah, that's like 100 years ago. Yeah, the English guy who used to run. I mean, once in a while you'll find one, but I'm saying generally, who wins? Well, if you look at heavyweight boxers, who wins? I'm just saying that certain races are optimized for certain things, right? And we have to understand what that optimization at the personal level is. You understand? Like I was saying about black people, I know my own results. So my kidney is a challenge among black people. So there's even a special measure on our reports for black people's kidney and the measure around that. So is things like, so APOE is a gene that all of us have. And most people who have that mutation have challenges ultimately in time with Alzheimer's. The other one is MTFHR. Yes, that's the folate metabolism mutation, right? And so a lot of people say, oh, I'm buying B12 from Costco, but you may be taking the wrong B12. Because there are two kinds of B12. There's the normal B12, and then there is the middle B12, which the people who have this mutation should take, because their body doesn't have the ability to absorb the normal B12. So they would take the methylated B12, which is a B12 that has the CH3 group that allows it to bind with the proteins. Okay? And how are you going to know that? And this folate metabolism, if you are not taking the right B12 or not eating the right foods, over a period of 20, 30 years leads to cancer. That's just what it is. So this kind of cancer doesn't come from radiation or toxicity. It comes from your underlying genetics, right? Because you are not receiving the right kind of nutrients to support what we call the folate metathione metabolic cycle. Okay? And there are other genetic markers, right? For example, my genetic marker says that I do not have a measure of satiety. What does that mean? I don't know when to stop eating. Many people have it. It's not just me. So the signal, you know, the Japanese have a saying, you should stop eating when you're 80% full. But if you don't have that signal, you don't know. So typically what you hear people say, oh, I overate. If you always say that, it means you don't know the signal when you're full. And it's a genetic issue. So you now have to manage it by looking at the size of the food that you're eating. If not, you overeat. It's not that the people are stupid and they like eating, it's that they don't have the signal. Is that making sense? The body does not have the alarm clock that says, ping, 80, ping, 90, ping, 100. Instead, you get to 150. Oh, I ate too much. See that? That's a genetic issue. All right. The second test that we do are the blood tests, and we tend to do two of them. We do the extracellular tests, and we do the intracellular tests. The extracellular test we do with Boston Heart, and the intracellular test we do with Vibrant America. These are all world-class organizations for diagnostics. So if you go to Kaiser and they run your blood test, I'm going to tell you that it's a bullshit test because they're running a cheap test. The tests that we run are very expensive tests because they come from globally recognized labs. And therefore, any test that you run, it's like restaurant cooking. It needs to have technical quality and effective quality. Right? That's why you don't just go and eat in any cheap restaurant.
They have patents.
Yes, and they have patents for specific kinds of tests that they run. And these are new age technology testing capabilities. Not Quest, not any of those funny labs around. These are top world-class labs that we're using, so that the results we get have significant variability. I mean, significant trust in the results, right? I'm not saying don't run those other tests. For example, when Sol brings her test, I look at them, but I don't have a lot of confidence in the numbers because I don't trust those labs that run those tests. And so when it becomes a life and death decision, you want to get the best results, right? So because doctors also have to look at the lab numbers, and it is important that you get the best lab numbers so you make the right decisions. Are we clear about this? People say, oh, but Charles, your test is not covered by insurance. Oh, it's too expensive. I'm like, okay, life is expensive. Why don't you just die? Right? Life is expensive. So you want to pay to get the best value. So what's the difference between extracellular and intracellular blood testing? Who knows the answer? Victor, tell us. You've done it. You see, I love to put my...
It's a nutrient.
No, well, I asked Victor, not Kim.
I can't recall at the moment.
Okay, so let me help you with that. Okay, so we're clear. So the food goes across from the intestines or the stomach into the bloodstream. That's the bloodstream. And then from the bloodstream, it goes into the cells. All right, that's the travel. And where do we need the nutrients to go, Saul?
To the cell.
Yes, we don't need the nutrients in the bloodstream. All the tests that people do, they're testing the nutrients in the bloodstream. We could find out what the nutrients are in the bloodstream, but if we don't test what is in the cell, we really don't know. Because you could have an absorption problem. So you could be taking all the right nutrients, but it's not getting into your cells. So this testing helps us, first of all, determine here, do we have the right nutrients? Number two, are they getting into the cell? That's very important.
How do you find that?
Well, Vibrant America has discovered a testing process where they take your cells from the blood and they crush it and they look at what's inside the cell.
Okay, what's the difference between platelet and...
Platelets are just the things that carry oxygen in the red blood cells.
So what is the importance of the platelet?
Well, because if you don't have enough, then they don't carry oxygen to the cells. They are carrying oxygen and hemoglobin to the cells. And they need that to be alive. So oxygenation of the cell is important in the energy production process. That's why people have fatigue. So when you have low red blood cells, you tend to be very weak and they say anemic. Right? When you have low white blood cells, what happens?
Infection.
Correct. You have low immunity. So those two things which are carried, and what's the third thing in your blood? The serum. The thing that carries the white and red blood cells to the place that is required, right? The liquid that carries the platelets and the red blood cells to the place they're needed, right? You need to know all this stuff. So what they do, we take your blood, we check what's in the serum, that's what's carrying the nutrient, then we check what's in the white and red blood cells. We crush them. And now we know, wow, these things are actually entering the cells. Does that make sense? Kaiser doesn't do any of this. So if you haven't done it, you don't know. You see the point? If you haven't done it, you don't know. So if you have a problem, you don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay, what test can you do to check the function of the kidney?
These two tests do that because it's also looking at your flow rates, right? It gives us extensive testing around the kidney. It looks at, can you give me a sample Boston report? So when it comes, I'm going to walk you through that. You haven't done Boston with us. Boston does extensive kidney testing. So it looks at all the...
How much does it cost?
So that's a different conversation. Okay, so, yes.
So what we're looking,
Sample report, right?
what we're looking at is whether the nutrient get absorbed in the cell.
No. What we're looking at, first of all, is whether you're eating the right nutrients.
Right.
That's the extracellular.
Okay.
That it gets absorbed from your stomach into the bloodstream. And secondly, that when it's in the bloodstream, it gets absorbed into the cell.
Into the cell tissue.
Correct. No, into the cell.
Into the cell.
It's the cell that makes up the tissue.
Right. So outside the cell versus inside. Outside means it's in the bloodstream. It's not to the cell yet. So you're testing the blood. How do you know whether the stuff is absorbed to the cell?
Because the red blood cells and the white blood cells are also cells. So if they're absorbing it,
so if they're absorbed into the red blood cell, therefore they're absorbed into
we're
the
assuming, because how else can we check it than to go remove your biopsy and crush it and find out? So it's easier to check that way. Very important question.
So there's a correlation that if
Yes.
some stuff absorbed into the blood cell, therefore they absorb into...
I like that point he just raised. It is the whole essence of biopsy. All of medical science is sampling. When we take a little biopsy, we test it, we make an assumption as to how much cancer you have. We didn't look at the whole cancer. We took a little sample and then we make estimations, grade, level, stage 4 cancer from that little sample. Are we correct? Do you know why we might not be correct?
Yeah, that's just assuming.
Because, say if you had lung cancer, right? That's the picture of my lung, right? And say the cancer was here, stage 4, and the cancer here was stage 1, and we biopsied over there.
It's not accurate.
But that is what we did.
Yeah.
Do you see the challenge even about biopsies? And therefore, they want to rely on these tests because the blood biomarkers will be more predictive of what's actually going on. And now we have blood tests for cancer that are coming out. Is that making sense, guys? So don't keep going with your PPO insurance to your doctors and listen to bullshit. Because most offices and hospitals and insurance systems are not doing the right level of testing that's required. Okay, it's important. Even if it is once in your lifetime, you need to do the right testing so you know where you are and not get deceived by bullshit. I'm serious. It's a very important issue. I came into this 2 years ago ignorant. And all what we've built here is based on that research. Because I wanted to have a long, healthy, good life. You understand? Okay. So that's blood. Let's go to... So this pathway genomics comes from saliva. All right. Can you put some of those diagnostic testings here? Then we look at your urine. There are two things that your urine can tell us. Your urine can tell us your hormones and your toxicity. Why are we checking toxicity in the urine?
Because it's the end of the process.
Correct, because it's the excretory process. So we are thinking, because you know the body doesn't like toxins, so the liver and the kidney are going to try and expel it. Are we getting the right numbers? It's an estimate. Because I think that one of the challenges that we have, we actually think that all these measurement systems are accurate. Right? We actually are suffering from the impression that they're accurate. Right? They're not. they're estimates. And an estimate, so you can't say, some people say to me, my HbA1c is 5.6. What do I say?
It's a range.
Right? We say this is 6.0. No, when you're here, you're diabetic. And if you're here, you're not. And if you're here, you are. But that's bullshit. For Asians, that's the distribution. The reason why it's at 6.0 because it's white people who tested it. You can call that racism, but the point is that black people, Asians, don't participate in clinical research. Do you see the price we pay for our ignorance and non-participation? So these are statistical measures. So when you go to your doctor and your doctor says, oh, you're fine, you're 5.6, we say, no, you're not. Because where you should be if you're above 50 years old, you should be around 5.0 or 5.2. We think that is a safe place to be. Around 5.2. So if you're anywhere above 5.2 and you're above 50 years old, that's not good for you. Why? Because we also know that Alzheimer's is a type 3 diabetes. Right? Alzheimer's comes from diabetes. The question is, when are you diabetic? We don't know. Rather, I want to keep you in the safe zone, right, Emerson?
Yeah.
I want you staying in the safe zone.
Certainly I will.
Okay, good. That's why you're here, my friend. Okay? So when we do the toxicity test, it's very important that you understand that it is just a frame of measurement. And that's why, for somebody like me, I detox every day. And you should also detox every 3 months. Because these metals and chemicals are accumulating. On top of that, if you have dental or metal things in your body, you must detox more often. If you have replacement metals anywhere inside your body, because the metals, whether it's copper or mercury or whatever, right, is dissolving inside your body. And so you need to look for ways of removing it. And even if you wear metal things on your body, it's being absorbed into your skin. You wear all this cheap gold bullshit. Right? And then it's all being absorbed into your body because you want to look cool with cheap shit, right? So if you're going to buy jewelry, you want to buy safe jewelry to wear so that it's not every day, that sweat and everything, just seeping into your body continuously. So toxicity, a lot of people, even when you're eating vegetables, okay, we've tested people who eat sprouts and celery and all of that. If the sprouts and celery and kale is grown in the Central Valley because of fracking, so when they're fracking, there's a lot of dust from the air that's putting that dust on the plants. That's toxicity. Because how many people wash vegetables like most Americans? Oh, it was washed and packed. So you pick it in the store and just put it in your salad and eat without rinsing in vinegar and water, as my mother told me. Right? So we've developed these ways of eating that we deceive ourselves that we're doing very well, right? So, because we're not paying attention, whether it's fruit or anything. So, because they spray all these fruits. So if you eat the fruit without really washing it very well, you're taking all that toxicity in from the sprays. Right? So even though you're eating well, toxicity is still a challenge. Why do we measure your hormones? So, did we measure your hormones yet? So hormones is what gives us vitality. Without hormones, we'll all be schwegbers. We'll be like worms. Hormones make us men and make us women and make us want to enjoy life, make us happy, right? It's hormones driving all of that. Cortisol. When it comes, we're ready to fight. Testosterone. I am the man. Estrogen. I am pretty. Right? All that defines the essence of our vitality. Without that, we should die, right, Emerson? We'll just go, Victor. Bye-bye, because I'm no longer a man. What is the point? Right? So we measure hormones because it is really at the center of vitality and how we feel about life. We want to wake up, we have ambition, we can fight, we can take charge and responsibility for a lot of things. The last thing that we measure is your stool. And what are we looking at in your stool? We are looking at your bacterial balance in your gut, because the gut is the most important thing. And then we're also looking at the integrity of your gut walls, right? That's why that big concept called leaky gut. We discussed that a lot, okay? So why do I go through all of this? Because very few people will do all these 4 groups of tests if they're not sick. Insurance will not pay for it if you're not sick. What do I mean if you're not sick? If you've not been diagnosed. Even after you've been diagnosed, they're looking for the tests that they don't want to pay for. That's why I love Americans, and they love their insurance, and it's all bullshit. I'm saying that I'm being recorded. It's all bullshit. So you need to take charge of your health and make sure you run all of this and you know where your health is. Then take it to your doctor. Read this, right? And most doctors cannot read these reports that we generate. It's too much stuff. That's the sample I'm going to give you. So it goes deep into looking at, right? It does the metabolic test. I'm trying to look for the kidney test. Look at that, the liver and the kidney test. Right? Why is the kidney and the liver test important? What is the big function of the kidney? Filters what? No, it's the kidney, not the liver. Did I say liver or kidney? Okay, no, I want to start with the liver. What's the function of the liver?
It just produce the insulin.
No.
Multitask function.
Yeah, I want to know what it is. There's a big function. See, the liver is such a big thing. It's a very important organ. It produces bile. The bile. What is the function of bile? Okay, I'm challenging you guys to go find out. Liver is a very important organ in your body, you should know. Okay? Bile, and the bile is recirculated. And recirculated at the beginning of the digestive process. Okay, now let's go to kidney. Number 1 is filtration. It's a very big job, right? Filtering all the bullshit. And how often do you have to change your filters at home? So many people don't pay attention to a filtration system that was built to last 100 years. Exactly. Imagine how many times you pee. Imagine a filtration system that is working for 100 years. And most of us don't even pay attention to it. You think, oh yeah, I'm just going to pee. Yeah, let me drink some more alcohol. I'm just going to pee. Yes. So,
oh, remember you asked me about the urine. What does it show if it's bubbly with soap?
No. It shows that there is an inefficiency in the filtration process, but we can talk about that offline. That's a very important topic. So when you pee and it's foamy, it's telling you about the filtration process and that certain things are passing through that should not be passing through, like fats or other proteins and things like that. Okay, it's just the efficiency and the effectiveness of the filtration process. Okay, so we've been walking through our diagnostics, but now let's go to what we call the clinical imbalances. So we're now on this page, the clinical imbalances. So let me ask you a question. So when I do all these tests, this is what I'm looking for. Because the problem with chronic illness is that all of us here have clinical imbalances. Why do we have clinical imbalances? Tell me. Because there is no car that does not produce waste. Right? This car built by God has its weaknesses as it is being used. Because some of the weaknesses are genetic, some of them is the bullshit that comes from outside. So you're going to build up imbalances over time. And a lot of these imbalances, right? And this is really the complication, guys. I want you to get this. That is why there is no drug that is going to cure diabetes. There is no drug that's going to cure Alzheimer's. There is no drug that's going to cure cancer. There is no drug that's going to cure Crohn's disease, because they're all lifestyle illnesses. And they originate from a combination of these 7 dysfunctions or imbalances that we're going to talk about. And so the big education today is the education on these imbalances. Then we're going to talk about the cancer journey. Why am I talking about this? Because cancer is at the end of the imbalance journey. That's where we arrive at cancer. These imbalances have been going on for a long time. It shows up as diabetes. It shows up as heart disease. You start taking medication. You keep doing the bullshit you're doing. Then it shows up as cancer or Alzheimer's or something, and then you die. Is that picture making sense? So, like, I spoke to some people, they are diabetic, but I like sugar. I said, then die. You're going to die because you like sugar? I mean, sugar, I haven't eaten sugar in what? I can't remember. It's not that important. If you really like sugar, then once a week eat an apple or a banana. Right? Those fruits are too sweet to eat every day. They're for kids. The minute you are above 50, it's too sweet. You cannot, because you are already sub-optimized in your insulin management. Because insulin resistance, right? The fact that we are producing too much glucose and the pancreas is not producing enough insulin to take that glucose out of the bloodstream is a big dysfunction of aging. Nobody is free from that. Except you're walking 20 miles a day. And if you're not, don't eat carbohydrates. Okay, let's start number 1, imbalance. Hormonal and neurotransmitter imbalances. So let's break that. Let's start with the hormonal imbalances, right? Estrogen imbalance. Today, we're getting women who in their early 20s already have estrogen imbalances. Where does it come from? From diet. So they have PCOS, they have painful menstrues, they can get pregnant, they develop fibroids, all sorts of complications coming from the estrogen imbalance. Then when they hit menopause, estrogen disappears. Right? And then it leads to a lot of other consequential things. That's just for men, testosterone. Right? That's why when we're 18, which is our most virile period, the men want to have sex. It's the testosterone drive. They want to have sex. And the women also are in their prime around 18. Why? Because the way God made it, that's when you have the most strong children. Emerson, that's why in the old culture, the women got married very early and produced very strong children like you and me. Today, the children that women are producing are very genetically weak because they produced them later in life when their eggs were already compromised. That is the biologics. I'm not the one who created it. That is the underlying biology. So when you go to the old culture, that's why they had children early. And these children were very strong. Today we are producing children from eggs that are already compromised. Let's look at neurotransmitter imbalances. What are neurotransmitter imbalances? These are imbalances around serotonin, norepinephrine, all the things that give us vitality and desire and strength. And at the core of that is what we call methylation, right? Methylation drives all the processes in the body to make sure that when there is an attack, we go to the point of the attack, that we attack, we know how to attack, we know how to send the different things, stem cells to the different places that they have to go. And when your neurotransmitters are low or they are over, we call it under-methylation or over-methylation. And so a lot of schizophrenias, autism, are under-methylated. And then a lot of people who are depressed and crazy, really crazy, are over-methylated or overstressed. They cannot sleep. They are really very excited. They can't calm down, right? A lot of excitability. So we have these two extremes, and the question is, how then do you bring them to the normal zone? That is the whole architecture of neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters, we are neurotransmitting animals, right? Secondly, around the neurotransmitters, when we are diabetic, that's why I look at microcirculation for people who've stepped on the machine. If there is no blood flowing to your arms and legs, then the neurons in those areas are not being fed, right? So let me just give you a simple picture of the neural architecture. So the neuron is like an electrical conduction line, right? That drives the whole body. We call the central nervous system. You all know that, right? All right? And there are two parts to the central nervous system. There is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. What does the sympathetic nervous system do?
Fight and flight.
Yes, all right. It's fight and flight. Did you hear that? It is the one that, and what does the parasympathetic do?
Sleep.
It calms us down. So when our neurotransmitter architecture is not working, right, especially the parasympathetic, we cannot relax. We don't have the ability, so we are always in the fight-flight mode, in the heightened mode, which is the sympathetic nervous system. And so we need to regulate it somehow and create some balance around that. That's what acupuncturists try to do. They try to balance the yin and yang. But it's not persistent. You have to go again and again and again and again, right? So we use nutrients and other things to create that balance back. So neurotransmitter imbalances, once the hormones go out of whack, that's why we connect it with hormones. When the hormones go out of whack, it also displaces the central nervous system architecture in terms of the clock, right? When to fight and when to sleep. Do you get that? All right? So that clock now doesn't run well anymore. Okay? Let's look at the next set. And so we have a lot of products here and things to help with that regulation. Oxidation and reduction imbalances, including mitochondriopathy. I know these are big words, guys, but stay with me and look at it. So oxidation is when you lose oxygen or they pull oxygen out, and reduction is when you bring oxygen in. So that whole process of oxygen transfer is critical to us being alive, right? So I have explained this in the mitochondria. So what is the mitochondria? Okay, the mitochondria is the energy powerhouse of the cell, right? And the mitochondria needs oxygen to produce energy. And it gets that oxygen from two sources as alternative fuel sources. You know, our mitochondria is a hybrid engine. It's very important, right? God designed a hybrid engine. It uses what? Carbohydrates in glycolysis, or it uses fat. Fat is the much cleaner energy source. Glucose or carbohydrates is what we call the lazy energy source. The cells love that. It's a lazy system. The challenge is that it produces some outputs that are very dangerous for us. So right now we're all producing it. We produce reactive oxygen species, which is the outcome of producing that energy. So if we don't have enough glutathione to remove or antioxidants, that's why we need antioxidants. Are you getting this? If you don't have enough antioxidants, then there's an accumulation of this reactive oxygen species that damages the engine of energy production. Is this making sense, guys? It's a very important issue. That's why one of the first signs of being sick is fatigue. What's happening? Your cells are clogged up. They can't produce enough energy. Do you get that? That's why fatigue is at the core of illness. You start feeling weak and tired all the time because your cells are clogged, and the first thing you want to do is to take the antioxidant to pull the waste gas out so the cells can start, and then you give them the right nutrients. Are you getting this? That's why the Eskimos in the winter eat mostly fat from the deers and the things they hunt, the seals. See, even the seal keeps a lot of fat for winter when they hibernate. It's the ultimate source for ultimate energy production, fat. Is that clear? That's why a ketogenic diet is a very important diet for three reasons. Number one, it is the best production for energy. Number two, the brain is 100% fat. Number three, the body loves it. But why do you think we love carbohydrates? Where did that love for it come from?
Sugar.
And the starch, we are most stationary where we eat a lot of plants and fruits.
Yeah, but that's not the reason we love it. It's because every day we had to run from tigers and work hard to feed ourselves. Life was survival. Yes, life was survival. Right? Lion, let's go. The people who didn't make it got eaten. So we developed this ability to, yes. Because if the lion was there, we went. The people who didn't make it, their gene pool disappeared. Are we clear about this? Yes. That's why it's easy for us to get stressed. Most of us who survived that era are the ones who could run from the lions. The ones who couldn't make it died. So we survived from the highly stressed people who could run and make it, right? Saul, you were part of that. Let's go. Saul was in front. Jad, you run behind, just in case the lion grabs you first, right? Like Kim would say, can you run behind me just in case the bear is faster? So while the bear is eating you, we could run, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So let's say if you don't eat carbohydrate and then a tiger or a lion chase after you, does that mean you're not gonna?
No, you have enough fat. No. The point is that if you've trained your engine, you see the challenge is that for the engine to convert from carbohydrate to fat needs training.
Can't you
If
do
you-
it with a
Yeah, if you've not been doing it, that's why it's difficult to start a ketogenic diet. Because the body is like, I need carbohydrate, and you're like, here's fat. No, I need carbohydrate. You have to train the engine. Once you train the engine, it becomes efficient. Is that making sense? So you have to train the engine to say, you're not getting any carbohydrates.